Great taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.
Welcome to Great Taste on KRUU 100.1 FM, the solar-powered voice of Fairfield, Iowa. I'm Steve Boss, and we are coming to you live from the Hy-Vee Club Room. And we are going to be visiting, well, not literally visiting, but sort of visiting Taiwan on the show. Because we have with us Grace White, who is a former resident. I guess you say former resident of Taiwan? Would that be the right thing to say? Okay, so former resident of Taiwan. And she is busy right now. I wish you could see this, but she's busy making scallion pancakes. And you know what? I missed one part here that we're going to have to go over because it looks like there's a lot. Oh, the oil is coming from the scallions, right? That's what okay. Nobody has any idea what I'm talking about, but we'll get to it in just a few minutes. Anyway, to kick off the show, we have a friend of Grace's here, and her name is Ananka Kallmeyer, and she recently went to Taiwan, right? With Grace a year and a half ago. Well, that's recent in the span of time, right? And Grace invited her here. I thought she was going to sing something Taiwanese, but much to my surprise, no. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're going to do? Oh, you don't know the rules, but that's okay. I didn't explain them to you, so that's okay. You can't touch the mic. It's not because I'm possessive. It's because it makes noise.
Very good. Okay.
I am possessive.
Well, yes, Grace invited me as her guest, and we stay with her very sweet sister who cooked for us sometimes, and also her two other sisters who lived not too far away with her mother. One of them would cook every Sunday, and this amazing big spread and a big lazy Susan in the middle of the table, and lots of things like fresh fish and vegetables and all sorts of things. And I'm pretty much vegetarian, but over there I ate a lot more fish because you can get all this amazing fresh fish. And we had things like oyster soup, which isn't like American oyster soup. It was a clear broth with oysters and onions and whatever. And there's lots of little tiny restaurants that are just like storefronts that we would eat breakfast or lunch or dinner. And some of them just had 2 or 3 little tables and little stools, but amazingly wonderful food. And for example, at breakfast, the traditional Taiwan breakfast is more like rice and some veggies maybe, and tofu or soy milk or maybe some pork thing. And one time I ate some pork blood pudding or something. I didn't know what it was.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you have any trepidation before you went to Taiwan about the food? Because it is obviously, Asian food is quite a bit different from the food that most people are used to consuming in the States.
Not really. Well, I lived in Japan for a couple of years when I was young, and I love Chinese food. Not that we probably get traditional Chinese food here, but not really. But a lot of times I would have wonderful seaweed and tofu, and they have a pudding that's like an egg custard, but I think it's not really sweet. It's just, and that was a yummy thing. And I'm trying to think. Some of the places, the breakfast places, would have an American flag if they had American breakfast, and so then they're more into like eggs and bacon and donuts and things.
And pork blood sausage. So.
Yeah, right. But a lot of the Taiwanese still get the traditional breakfast, and they might wrap some things in a rice little wrap and veggies or eggs. So I really miss the food there. I even have dreams about it sometimes.
Nice. That's great. That's where you know you really experience the culture, I think. Right. Not only interpersonal relationships, but if you've got dreams about the food, because I have a friend of mine who in Italy who that's one of his favorite things to say. You're like sitting there and you're trying to finish your meal and you're getting full and you're kind of looking at him and your eyes are half glazed over, and he just always says, when you leave, all you can do is dream, which he's saying, finish it.
Right. Don't waste it while you're there. Very good. Well, Grace asked if I wanted to sing a song, so I just decided to sing this little song that is a grace before meals that I wrote to an old traditional hymn type tune. So here it goes.
But not Taiwanese.
Not Taiwanese, unfortunately. I did learn a little Chinese, but that was a whole other story, I guess. Okay. Lord of all fruitfulness and all that grows, the earth gives us bounty, her love overflows. Be here as we together, and give us, we pray, hearts that are thankful as we break bread today.
That's awesome. That was beautiful and perfect. Thank you, Ananka, very much. And I think that one of the great things about what you did is that you really put Tom Allen. He's on the hot seat now to perform when it comes time for him. So I sure hope he's going to come up with something Taiwanese. We'll see what happens. All right. So we are going to get into a discussion about Taiwanese food in just a few minutes, and go through a lot of absolutely fascinating things: scallion pancakes, sweet and sour veggies, and green tea mochi. Is that right? Did I say it right? Mochi? Is that how you say it? Right. Okay. Green tea mochi, and that's all coming up in just a few minutes. Did you want to say something? Were you like? I just noticed you were really anxious, so I wanted to see what was going on.
So when we cook, we need to heat the
skillet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hot.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can put the oil into that. Then when they're hot, then you can put this in. Yeah.
Okay. So what Grace is explaining is the scallion pancakes, and I'm going to tell you the recipe for those scallion pancakes, and that is 2.5 cups. This will make 5. Let's see, what size are those discs? 5, about 6 inch. You think about 6 inches across? 5 6-inch discs. And they said that it'll serve more than 5 people, but I said I would eat a whole one, so I'm not going to. It'll serve 5 people. 2.5 cups of all-purpose white flour, hot water, very important, hot water, 2 bunches of scallions, a tablespoon of toasted sesame oil, that's toasted sesame oil, 1 tablespoon of salt, and a bit of white pepper, better if it's fresh ground, and you'll need coconut oil. And the procedure is really very simple. You heat the water up, you chop the scallions, you mix in the toasted sesame seed oil, salt, and white pepper. That's all mixed in with the scallions. And then to 2.5 cups of all-purpose white flour, you add 1.5 cups of hot water. Mix and knead into a loaf. And what you're looking for is a texture that it's not dry, it's definitely not wet, it's not sticky. It's just perfectly wonderful and smooth. And you're going to mix that together and knead it into a loaf. You don't have to knead it for any amount of time, though, right? In just a couple of minutes, right?
Yeah, couple of minutes.
Okay, so it's really simple. You're not baking bread here. And you're going to cut that then into 3 to 4 pieces, roll out the pieces into a long rectangle, and then you're going to spoon the scallion mix onto the dough. And once you spoon the scallion mix onto the dough, you're going to roll that dough back over the scallion mix lengthwise, pinch the ends so you have a spiral shape, all right? And then you're going to flatten it into an 8 to 9 inch diameter pancake. So it's a little bit bigger than I thought. Still, it's enough for one person. And then you're going to roll it out again with a what is that thing called? A rolling pin, right? That's right. You're going to roll. You guys are good. You can come again. That's actually, roll it out with a rolling pin again into that 8 to 9 inch shape. And so, of course, you got your scallion, oil, salt, pepper mix inside that, and it's beautiful, and it'll come out to be something delicious. And what Grace wanted us to know is that you're going to heat your coconut, then you're going to take a skillet, and you're going to heat your coconut oil up really hot before you put that scallion pancake into the skillet. And you're going to cook it until it's golden brown on both sides. That takes about 3 minutes on each side. And probably better to eat it hot too, right? Yeah, definitely hot. And as Doug White pointed out earlier, you do not want to put jam on it. It's not really made for sweet things, but it's really good with savory food. All right, we're going to come back to our Taiwanese discussion in just a few minutes, but first I want to talk to Avi Pogel, who's come over to visit with us for a little bit. Since 2013, he's been working for Green Planet 21. And the reason I wanted Avi to come in, not only because I like to see him, but I also wanted him to talk a little bit about what he's doing, because I think it's really fascinating. Avi, as you know, is a trained chef, but he's doing something a little bit different with food at this moment, and doing it with some very large industrial companies. So could you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
So over the past year, I have spent time working at the Campbell Soup's second largest factory, the original Oscar Mayer factory, the place where they make mayonnaise and Velveeta, as well as the place where they make Jell-O cups.
Not, I wish I was an Oscar Mayer.
Yeah, that was the first one. It's a 100-year-old original Oscar Mayer slaughterhouse in Madison, Wisconsin. And so it's got this weird feeling to it, as you can imagine, gigantic vats of hot dogs. So I've also been at Butterball processing plant, so the largest turkey slaughterhouse in the world, as well as a couple other slaughterhouses. So it's not where I imagine myself being, working in these places where they make just conventional products that you see on the shelves and all the packaging. But as a recycling company, we go in and we do audits of their waste stream and offer improvements and revenue savings through waste reduction. And it's particularly challenging, I found, especially with the Oscar Mayer products, because there's PVC in the packaging because it's an oxygen barrier. And there are other coatings on those plastics. So you see that clear bubble of salami or whatever on the shelf. There's 5 or 6 different layers of different polymers in there, and it really can't be recycled, and especially because of the PVC. And so they produce, one factory, it's like 100 tons of this material a month. It's actually probably closer to 150, 175, so I was just calculating off of like one particular line. And so I'm really, I want to find long-term solutions. I mean, the best solution are for these companies to go back to their packaging departments and say, reformulate these packages so that they can be recycled, they're sustainable. But they have so much money already invested in the marketing and the packaging that's really like not going to happen. There are companies coming out with technologies that can break apart the plastics into the original petrochemical products, which can be used as a fuel source. And the PVC is still an issue. I mean, when PVC breaks down, turns into chlorine gas, it's always toxic, but they have ways to mitigate it. So as long as we can get some of that plastic into a larger waste stream to get processed into fuel, I think that's going to be the best long-term option for these challenging food products, food packaging. Go back to the original engineering of the packaging for a moment. If the engineers, the designers, probably given a set of criteria, it needs to look good, it needs to be easy to open, it needs to have a shelf life of this many days, and they accomplished that. No one has said, and it needs to be recycled. And, when Kennedy said we'll put a man on the moon, that's ridiculous, but we did it. So if we set out a certain goal, we'll either find that it's actually impossible, which is probably not, or we'll accomplish it. So I think moving forward, it's important that we set those goals in industry, that they think about the long-term effects.
So let me ask you this. If I understand what you're saying, it's not economically feasible for these companies to change what they're already doing. Is there any entity, and I'm sure fans of big government won't like this question, but is there any entity like the federal government who's paying attention and saying, hey, wait a minute, we've got to do something about this?
Not along the lines that we're discussing. I mean, if for some reason it became clear that the coatings in these plastics were really detrimental to your health, and there was some sort of epidemic about that, then the government would step in and say you can no longer put these coatings in the plastic. And I don't want to say, speak ill about clients of ours, but thinking that, if you're eating a salami or bologna that's conventionally raised, meats filled with preservatives, that I think the packaging is probably the least of your concerns.
Okay, so all this stuff basically just goes into landfill.
Yes. However, there are a lot of other products that they have, and it's hard if you haven't really been into these factories to think about what we're recycling, because you're just thinking of your post-consumer soda can and ketchup bottle, milk carton, or whatever, random packaging box. But all of their ingredients are coming in boxes, and a lot of those boxes are then wrapped with a clear stretch film to reinforce them for transport. And a lot of times when they receive stacks of boxes for packaging, they're wrapped in plastic strapping. And so all of those materials are recyclable. And a lot of these places I'm going to where there's plenty of recyclable products, but they're just not recycling it. And so it's just a matter of convincing them that it's actually not that much harder to recycle than it is to throw things away. And we come back and we just basically show them the savings that they would have. Because a lot of these products, like a clear stretch film, we call a grade A plastic, and often reimburse companies about $100 a ton for that plastic, and then we have a margin on that, so there's a market price which is over $100 a ton, and so they'll throw away 20 tons of that in a month. In addition, they're paying for the garbage. So we can say, well, and they're paying, a lot of these workers don't always work all the hours that they can in a day. I don't think you'd want to either if you were in like a bacon packaging factory or whatever. But there's plenty of time and there's plenty of room to improve the process and save money and not throw things away. So I think for that grade A plastic, 1 ton of plastic will replace a single barrel of oil. So there's a direct correlation in terms of fossil fuel reductions.
Now, are you there at the invitation of these companies?
I think so. I'm pretty new to this. My boss will call me up and say, hey, I need you to go to Madison. We're going to set you up there for 3 weeks. Or the most recent one was a Smithfield Foods in Sioux Falls. Actually, there's one in Sioux City called Curly's where they make barbecue ribs, and then there's the plant that provides them with their meat in Sioux Falls where they kill 16,000 hogs a day, which is a pleasant place. And so I thought, oh, great, they want to recycle. Then I'm going to be offering these suggestions. But it turns out there really wasn't the case, and so there's some stuff going on a corporate level, and I got there, and the people really weren't helpful at all. So I guess I was invited, but at the same time, there's these different levels of politics between the corporate level and the plant level, and then the floor managers versus the storeroom managers and all that sort of good stuff.
Well, it must be fascinating for you. And by the way, I just want to make it clear that Avi's made a few comments as he's been talking here about, a pleasant place, going to a slaughterhouse, that type of thing, that he's actually being a little bit facetious, of course, but he's not a vegetarian. I mean, he's a hunter. I just want to make that clear so everybody understood that he's not coming from a place where he's, on the payroll of the Vegan Society or anything like that. So it's just that you and your food sensibilities are you are someone who really feels like if people are going to eat meat, then they should know where it comes from, they should know how it's raised, it should be raised humanely, and even the best way to do it is to actually go out and hunt it yourself.
Yeah, or raise it yourself, or contract with a farmer, ideally doing sort of integrated pasture management. A lot of what Joel Salatin's doing, I think, is kind of the cutting edge of animal husbandry, and that's meat that I think should be eaten, and of course wild game. But here in Iowa, even the deer we're hunting, are essentially still finished on corn and soybeans. So it's not like it's a completely wild.
That's interesting. I never even thought about it, but you're right.
And well, I lost my train of thought there. So.
Well, that's all right. Is there anything else that, because I think this is really fascinating that there are companies out there, and I think that are doing what you're doing, and I also think that it's something that I never ever, just didn't cross my mind. Like you said, most of our attention, I think, as consumers, is on that post-consumer recyclable, but there's so much waste. It's absolutely amazing. So anything that we can do to mitigate it is got to be helpful to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to go back to the nutritional quality of these conventionally raised foods. So often, I didn't grow up eating a lot of packaged foods. Nothing was really, filled with preservatives, and I really looked down upon it. But then going to these factories and seeing that they are just cooking food in very, very large quantities. It is edible, but it's still not necessarily good for you. There's a lot of marketing involved, and the actual quantity of food you're paying for is a small percentage of what is really there. But I realized that the biggest issue goes back to the soil, and it's these animals are being fed conventionally raised corn and soybeans, genetically engineered. The soil is being compacted. It takes, I don't know how many gallons of diesel fuel, 6 or 10 gallons of diesel fuel to make like 1 calories worth of corn, which is then given to an animal, which then 90% of that is lost, and 90% of that is lost. And so at the end of the day, we're getting food that's completely devoid of nutrition. It's this destructive environmental process. And then at the same time, we have an obesity epidemic. So I think that the issue, it needs to change, not necessarily on the, how they can recycle better, although that's what I'm doing because it's a place to start. But, reassessing how our food is raised. Get rid of the farm subsidies, make a level playing field for organic farmers. I think would probably be the best starting place.
Great. Thank you, Avi, very much. Really appreciate it. It was terrific. All right. Okay, so you're listening to KRUU 100.1 FM, the solar-powered voice of Fairfield, Iowa. I'm Steve Boss, and we are coming to you live from the Hy-Vee Club Room, and we are talking about Taiwanese food with Grace White. And you wanted to say something.
Yes, for Taiwanese Chinese, we like eat hot. The food is warm or hot, so can I serve it right now?
You certainly may, yes. You can certainly serve that. And what I would like to do is I'd like to talk to your husband because I'm very interested in the food culture of Taiwan, and I think that he can help us out a little bit talking about that food culture. Now, Doug White, thank you very much for joining us. So can you give us a little bit of a history lesson in terms of, we'll wait till Mary goes by here, and then can you give us a little bit of history lesson in relation to Taiwanese food? Taiwan is an island, used to be known as Formosa, off the coast of China.
That's correct. And so Taiwan is a very unusual place because it is sort of the centerpiece of the Pacific East Asian area. It's separate from China, but it has also been a part of China. The original occupants of the island were Polynesians. They're part of the Pacific Islander culture, and so they have their own culture, and there's about 20 different tribes living there, and they all have their own style of cooking and their cuisine. And then the island was then populated by immigrants from China, mostly from the Fujian province, which is right across the Taiwan Straits. And they brought with them their own style of Chinese cuisine. And of course, being an island, they have a lot of seafood there. But then what happened was that at the end of the 19th century, the Qing dynasty government ceded Taiwan to Japan. So Japan occupied Taiwan and began to develop the infrastructure there, and they, of course, brought the Japanese culture, the language, and their cooking to Taiwan, and that added another whole layer to the Chinese and the Pacific Islander culture. And in fact, one of the dishes that we have tonight, the what you call mochi, that's actually the Japanese name. In Taiwanese, they call it muaji, and in Japanese, it's mochi. So it's what they will be making as the dessert at the end of the talk tonight. And then an interesting thing happened at the end of World War II. The Japanese ceded Taiwan, and it became an unknown quantity at that point. And in the meantime, China engaged in a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And eventually, the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, they lost that war, and they withdrew from the mainland onto Taiwan. And they brought with them the whole nationalist government and their troops and their along with their cooks. And of course, the many scholars also came with them, and people who had been very well educated and had very high taste in food. So what happened was a sudden blossoming of Chinese cuisine from every part of China. Every province had its own specific style of cooking, and these were all national representatives from each of these provinces came to Taiwan, and they began opening restaurants to please their taste. And of course, then we had the Vietnamese War, in which the Americans participated, and they were having big military installations on Taiwan, and that brought American influence to Taiwan, and so now you have a tremendous American.
You're talking about hamburgers and pizza?
Oh yes, and McDonald's and all of that, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's all there. But then they developed, when they finally decided they weren't going right back to the mainland, they decided to have to really get solid in Taiwan and build a powerful economic culture there, and they did. They created an economic miracle, and so you began seeing everything was made in Taiwan. And what happened then was that they became very affluent, and so they not only had all the Asian cuisine, including, of course, Indian and Thai and Vietnamese and so forth, and then they began having a very fine European restaurants. So you can get French food and Russian food, and you can get, even German food, and I suppose there's some English food there, but I never tried any. But it's you can have food from pretty much anywhere in the world in Taiwan of high quality. And at first, their baked goods were not so good because they didn't know how to make bread properly. But eventually, they caught on, and now you have all kinds of fine quality and pastries, and the whole thing is.
Now, my understanding is that lately the renaissance of Taiwanese cooking, you've got all those different layers as you mentioned, but lately the renaissance has been in going back to the indigenous foods, and that those are what the great chefs that are in Taiwan are really trying to focus on these days.
Well, I'm not in the fine restaurant circuit in Taiwan, but yes, it's true that the indigenous people are reasserting their identities. In fact, you have some of them have become quite famous, even in China. They're very popular singers and performers, and so there's a much greater awareness of these things. Yeah, and also Taiwanese cuisine has its own special flavor too, and it's sort of a combination of Chinese, Fukienese, and just an island culture. Also, Taiwan has lots of fruits because it's a semi-tropical island, so it's very lush and very, very wonderful fresh foods of all kinds.
So you can eat well there, and you can eat really healthy then if you wanted to. Now, did they have the same kind of problem with the Western influence coming in over time with the Vietnam War, and then now since then? Have we seen the same kind of problems that are afflicting other cultures that have been exposed to our Western food culture, which is obesity, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, that type of thing?
Yes, that is there to some extent, but the Chinese are very committed to their own cuisine. And I should mention there's another new wave of happening in Taiwanese cuisine, and that is that you now find, where we were living in a suburb of Taipei, within a few blocks of us, there were 3 organic food marketplaces. So you can get organic food, and they're cooking with less oil, and they're cooking very healthy food now. And they have actually some of these organic food stores. They will provide lessons teaching the housewives how to upgrade to more healthy cooking. So it's really happening, and it's happening quite fast.
Did they have With the Western influence, did they actually adopt the chemical agriculture that we found here in the States for so long?
Yes, but there also there's been a problem, because of the economic development. There's been a competition for the land, the agricultural land, because Taiwan is probably about 80 to 90% mountain land, and so there's only the flat land is only on one side of the island in a strip down the island, and so you have competition for urban sprawl, for industrial development, and then agriculture is trying to hold its own. But you also have the level of education is very high in Taiwan, and they have sent people to study agricultural technology in the U.S. and in Europe, and they now have very advanced agricultural techniques. And although there is still use of pesticides and fertilizers, but this awareness is growing very rapidly, and they're the technology they're developing is they're very skilled scientifically, and so mainland China, for example, is very, very interested in the agricultural technology of Taiwan for developing their own agriculture, which is very important because they have many mouths to feed.
Interesting. One of the other things I was curious about, what about the beverage industry, beer, wine, that type of thing?
Yes. When I first went out there in the 60s, the alcoholic beverages were all controlled by a monopoly run by the government, and you couldn't get foreign beverages of that type in Taiwan. You had to buy them sort of either through the U.S. military PX or the black market or something like that. But eventually they opened it out. As the economic miracle came on, they found that they had to diversify, and so you can get all of both the traditional Chinese wines and the European and American wines and beverages, and of course also they have modern soda pops and fruit drinks of various kinds, and you may have heard about the what do they call it, pearl tea, where they have tea and they put tapioca, little balls of tapioca in it. That was developed, it was invented in Taiwan, and it's become popular throughout the whole world. Right. So they have actually been contributing to the world beverage industry.
Very interesting. Thank you, Doug. That was really, really fascinating. And if we get some more time, we'll come back to that a little bit later. So, what are you doing right now, Grace?
I'm doing mochi. Mochi.
Mochi in Japanese, or mochi?
For Taiwanese, we say mochi. But here, I think people say mochi, right? Yes.
And so this is, what I think is really fascinating is that the main ingredient in this is taro root. Is that right?
Yes, it's taro root.
And taro is a vegetable, right?
I think so.
and it doesn't grow. I don't think that, does anybody grow taro around here? I don't think so. But I mean, I know we think about it with Hawaii. With Polynesia is where I associate taro. And so where in the heck do you get taro root to use in a dessert like this? You get it at an Asian food store?
Asian food store. You mean here, or
no? Just that's where you have to buy it, right? At an Asian food store. You can't just go to the grocery store. You can't go to the grocery store and find taro root usually, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then now you told me that you have to prepare it a specific way, right? You have to actually prepare the taro root. So how do you do that?
Peel. Yes.
You peel it, right? Okay.
Yeah. And I cut.
Right. You cut the taro root and peel it.
Yeah, and I steam.
Then it has to be steamed. Yeah. Okay, so because it's a root, so it's a strong root vegetable, all right?
Yeah, and I steam, and after that, and I add sugar. And
we're using coconut sugar.
Yes, or any kind of sugar you like. Yes, and Then
And then you're mashing it up. You're making essentially not a paste, but you're just smashing it.
Yeah.
Smashing it up. Okay, so that's very interesting. So this is the dessert that Grace and her able assistant Joyce Salmon are preparing, and that's green tea mochi. And you're going to need to go to a specialty store to find some of these ingredients. So you're going to need a cup of taro root chopped. You're going to steam the taro and mash it with sugar to taste, about 2 tablespoons. And then you're also going to need some other interesting ingredients. You're going to need a half a cup of sweet, sticky rice flour, a teaspoon of potato flour, 2 teaspoons of green tea powder, ground fine, and 2 tablespoons of coconut sugar. And you're going to stir them all together and add a third of a cup of coconut milk. So those are the basic ingredients. You've got coconut milk, you've got coconut sugar, you've got green tea powder, potato flour, rice flour, and the most unusual ingredient, taro root. And as I said, we'll be posting this recipe on the blog, but it's very, very interesting in terms of making a dessert. And they also make, I think ice cream is also made. They make ice cream out of mochi, the Japanese do, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very special taste.
Very special taste. That always scares me when somebody says that, actually. Very special taste. Speaking of special, Tom Allen is here. Now, I hope I've given you enough time to come up with a Taiwanese song.
Of course. And the connection is that English is the only nationality that she didn't mention. However, they are across the way in Hong Kong. So we have an English country dance tune by the most tenuous of logic, of course. And this is,
I especially like that. Yes, by the most tenuous of logic.
If that. And so this is an English country dance tune from the 1700s, which I wrote about 3 weeks ago. And it's called First Cup of Coffee.
Tom Allen, everybody. And if that didn't put you in the mood for mochi, I'm not sure what will. Thank you very much. Okay, so now Grace is getting her hands green as she's making the green tea mochi. So that's kind of cool, actually. I like that. It's too bad that everybody can't see that. So you're actually making it like a dough, basically. That's what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So you've added what to it? What type of liquid?
Liquid is
Yes. What is that?
Coconut milk.
Coconut milk, right? Okay. So and what kind of texture are we looking for with this? And you're kneading it, right?
A little sticky.
Okay, so you want this to be a little sticky, so that's a lot different than the scallion pancakes, which, by the way, were absolutely delicious. I really enjoyed them and really, really good hot. Now, what are some of the things that you could eat with the scallion pancakes? I mean, do you ever put anything on top of them, for example?
No, you don't need it. Or you can put on top. Some people in Taiwan, we put the sesame seed, white or black. Yeah. Yeah.
White or black sesame seed, but you don't spread like normally here in the States we would take something like that and we'd spread something on top of it. I don't know what that would be, like a cheese spread or some other type of spread, because when we see things like that, like crackers or bread in that kind of shape, we're always thinking about dipping it into something.
Sorry.
That's not the food sensibility of a Taiwanese person, though. They're going to eat it either with black or white sesame seeds, or they're just going to eat it plain, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think is that right, Doug? It's basically that type of food. Yeah, they don't put anything on it. And do they eat it? I mean, is it eaten with food, right? Is it eaten with food? Like, would we eat it with the sweet and sour vegetables that you're going to make? Would you scoop up your vegetables with it, for example?
The vegetable.
Mm-hmm. Would you take the scallion pancakes and
No. Some people in Taiwan, a lot of people in Taiwan, when we eat the pancake, usually the soup is sour, hot, 酸辣汤.
hot and sour soup?
Yeah.
Hot and sour soup, right?
Hot, yes.
And so you eat that with the pancake?
Yes, usually.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's very interesting. I like that. Tom, I saw that you took two pieces. You're trying to. I could see that, buddy. Come on, man. You think that English country dance tune warranted two pieces of pancake? Well, wait a second. If you have something important to say, I better come over here with.
When I worked in a kitchen, I did time as a short order cook, and to fill up my empty spaces, I made kitchen insults, such as, he doesn't know a scallion from a stallion, or he doesn't know a carrot from a parrot.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
So next week on Great Taste, we are going to celebrate Thanksgiving. So the Indian Hills Culinary Arts students will be here, and they will be making a fantastic Thanksgiving feast for all of us. And the week after that just so happens to be the day before Thanksgiving. Of course, the listening audience will hear that the week after, but that's also the first night of Hanukkah. And so we're going to be having an Eastern European evening where we're going to have chicken soup and applesauce and latkes, which are potato pancakes. So it must be in a pancake mode. So it's going to be a fun next 2 weeks here on Great Taste, live at Hy-Vee from the club room. And right now what's happening is that these little mochi balls are being made, and they're green because of the green tea that was in them. And I want to also tell everybody that we're going to be doing sweet and sour veggies. Now, I've always liked, sweet and sour seems to be a major part of Asian culture in terms of the types of food. Now, why is it? Is it the taste that Asian culture particularly likes, that type of taste, that sweet and sour taste?
Yeah, usually Taiwanese like. Mm-hmm. Yes, like a sour and sweet mixed together. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what I'm interested in, Grace, is when you were growing up, what type of foods were you... In other words, we heard from Doug that there are so many different influences in Taiwan, the indigenous influence, the influence from the mainland of China, the influence from Japan, the influence from the nationalist Chinese when they came over and brought people from every province there to cook, the American Western influence. What type of family influence background? First of all, where did your family come from originally?
From south of China, Fujian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the province that Doug mentioned, where most of the original, the influx of people to the island came from. And in Fujian, what type of cuisine did that culture generally enjoy? What type of foods?
Oh, what kind of food?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of seafood. A lot of seafood. Okay. So basically, when they brought that to Taiwan, has that stayed basically the same? In other words, when you were raised, did you eat a lot of seafood? Did you? And then what type of spices or preparations? How was it made? Was it grilled? Was it baked? Was it cooked in an oven? I mean, I just have no knowledge at all about the preparations of this type of food.
Yeah. For Taiwanese, we don't have an oven. Oven. Okay. We usually stir fry, so we just use the stove. So usually we stir fry, so we can stir fry a lot of different kind of vegetable. So for Taiwanese, we like seafood, a lot of different kind of vegetable to make dishes. Yeah.
And stir frying, I think it's an art that most people really don't have, because I think when Americans generally think of stir frying, they think of they just throw stuff into a wok or into a pan with some hot oil, stir it around a bit, and take it out, and it's served California style, which means the vegetables are mostly raw. And I'm wondering, I know there's a lot more to it than that. So, what are the most important elements of stir frying? And first of all, do you cook that way today? Is that how you usually cook?
Today I want to cook is a traditional Taiwanese cook this way. But for me, when I at home, I usually cook, use water, not use oil to cook. I use the water, cook vegetable, anything. I don't want to the temperature more than 100 degree.
How many? 100. It's got to be more. Oh, 100 degrees centigrade. I'm like, wait a minute, 100 degrees. This is raw food then. It's 100 degrees centigrade. Okay, fine.
But today, for the Taiwanese, usually stir fry, we use the different kind, like onion or garlic or some kind of spice to make the dishes a lot of flavor. Yeah. So.
What kind of spices are really used there? In terms of, like, when you think about some of the more exotic spices that are used in Taiwan for cooking?
Usually it's a 5 spice, and a different kind of.
Well, Chinese 5 spice. So now, what's in that? Do you know what the different spices are in there? That's all right. Well, we can, if somebody has time, they can look it up right now online and let me know what's in Chinese 5 spice. But it's delicious. I think it's a great mixture too. I've been to a couple of Chinese places in Chicago. I know where they actually serve some of the 5 spice on the side, and you can actually sprinkle it on top of your chicken dish or something like that.
And for mochi, we just do it then add tallow, then make a bowl, then go to steam, then anything done.
Okay, so what you're basically doing is that you have 2 different doughs that you're working with essentially. You've got the dough, the green tea dough that you made, and then what the other one is what? What's the other? This is the taro.
This is taro, yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting. So once you have the green tea dough, you're actually taking a little bit of like a little ball of the mochi, putting it in the center, and then you're wrapping it around it essentially, right? Folding it around it. Now, you also made a chocolate one, and I don't see it. Well, how does? So she's gonna, I'm so glad I reminded you. Grace is frantically grabbing the chocolate chips to put into the chocolate mochi. I am curious though still about the sweet and sour, because you have to get that right, because a lot of times I find that it ends up being sickeningly sweet, when people make that. So there's a fine balance that has to be created.
You mean too sweet? Yeah. Right now the Taiwanese, we don't eat it too sweet. Yeah. So, but still some dishes we like to add some sugar. Yeah. So today I will add some sugar in these dishes. Yeah.
Is there a sweet tooth then amongst the Taiwanese? The Taiwanese have sweet tooth. Do they like desserts?
Yeah. But a lot of dessert for Taiwanese is savory. It's not sweet. Yeah. We eat the dessert is savory. Is just some is sweet.
So typically, what would be a savory dessert?
Like how can I say baozi? Baozi.
Steamed buns. You'd eat that for dessert though? Oh really? Okay. Interesting. Okay.
还有烤的烧饼. How can I say that? Yeah. 还有锅贴. I don't know
you
how
can
to
say it in Taiwanese. That makes it more interesting, actually, to listen to on the radio.
I don't know how to say that in English.
That's okay. I'll run over to Doug, who doesn't know how to say it in English either. So it's.
Well, they're rectangular They're sort of like, you know, when you have a hot dog, you have a hot dog bun. Okay, so they use this, it's split in the center so you can open it up, except that it's cooked in an oven rather than, and it's a flat, sort of a folded pancake, but that's got sesame seeds on the outside. And then what they do is they make a cruller, which is cooked in hot oil. It's just a specially made strip of dough, which is then cooked in hot oil. So it's sort of like a long donut, which is the hot dog part, and you cut that in half and you stick it into the sesame bun.
So wait, we've got the dough inside the dough?
Yeah, it's dough inside dough, right. But it has a different flavor.
It sounds like the Taiwanese version of the cronut.
You have that for breakfast with soybean milk, hot soybean milk, which can either be sweetened or can be spicy. They put hot pepper oil in it, and scallions and various other things. Yeah, so it gets quite interesting.
No, that is very interesting. So savory breakfasts are something that's typical. I think Grace mentioned that.
Yeah, they have. You know, some people have rice and often.
Do we need to move Jason, by the way? It's fine. I'm asking Jason about the video. It's okay? All right, so.
Yeah, they often have a rice porridge. It's rice that's been cooked in a lot of water so that it's like a porridge, and then you have it with various kinds of preserved vegetables like a cucumber or. And they also have special ways of making tofu that is it's very spicy or salty, or even is sort of like these cheeses that, you know, blue cheese and so forth that have fungus sort of in them, dark.
So you're talking about tofu?
Yeah, tofu, yeah.
Come on up here. I want to ask you a couple other questions, actually, because
It's called stinky tofu.
Stinky.
Yeah,
stinky
because it really smells.
Tofu. I suppose that's something that you have to develop a taste for.
Yeah, and they have restaurants where they give them a score as to how stinky it is. You know, you got a level of 200, 300, 400 level stink to it, and you know, they like to take guests there and see what level they can tolerate. I'm serious.
I believe that you're serious. It's very, very interesting. Now, I wanted to ask a little bit about the preserved vegetables.
Yeah.
This is something that we see in Asia. We see it in Japanese culture, Korean culture, Chinese culture. And so in Taiwan, was there anything like that in the indigenous culture also? Or is this something that came from outside influences?
I think that's from Chinese culture. I don't know that much about the indigenous culture because it's sort of it's not as widespread. There are minority groups, and they're spread around the island in little enclaves, often in the mountains. So you have to go there, and I haven't traveled up in the mountains that much. So, but yeah, they have these big pottery jars that they put vegetables in to pickle them, just like we make pickles, but they're you know, so, but they're different from our Western style pickles, but you can go to an Asian food store, and you can get them in little jars or cans. They also have a substance called wheat gluten, which is made in little dumplings, and it's really wonderful to have with rice porridge in the morning. And they have they have a shredded pork, and there's a vegetarian version of that. I'm not sure what they use to make it.
Probably with the wheat gluten, actually.
No, I think it's probably made from soy. But
it could be tofu, right?
Bet on it, because I just don't know. But it looks just like the pork.
Wheat gluten. I'll bet on that.
Okay. But it's sort of shredded. Mm-hmm. And in long shreds, and then you could just sprinkle it on your porridge and have it together. So there's the breakfast is very, very interesting. There's a lot of choices. Of course, there's sandwich shops all over the place where you can get it, various kinds of toasted. What they do is they put toast and then they'll put a fried egg or something like that. Just like Western breakfast. And of course they have cereals available in the stores, so you can eat a Western breakfast if you want. But
with all that,
so many wonderful local breakfasts.
With all that diversity, I'm not sure why you'd want to do something like that. There weren't my notes, but I don't think I need them anyway, so it's quite all right. So when you first came to Taiwan, were you experienced with? Did you already have an introduction to Eastern culture, and so you knew what to expect, or was this something that you had to learn to appreciate in terms of? I think just by listening, I don't know how people feel, in the audience, listening audience, and also of course the people who are here. But to me, it's so foreign in terms of the different types of foods that we're talking about that it's. I would look at it for myself as something that would be a really interesting experience to immerse myself in, but I think it would be a stretch also for me in a way.
Yeah, but if you like food, it's a wonderful experience. Of course, when I went out there first, I knew how to use chopsticks. I'd learned that in Chinese restaurants, so I was ahead of the game on that respect, and I also could read Chinese, which was very helpful. I couldn't speak it very much. I went out there to start learning how to speak it, and it was really a challenge for the first 6 months. But after that, it got much easier. But there was always surprises along the way. But the food, of course, you can just go in and the Chinese give every dish a very special name, like ants climbing up a tree or something like that, really mai shang shu, and palace.
I'm dragging you in a little closer. My arm is hurting.
Oh, sorry. Gumbao ji ding, diced chicken palace style, and they glorify everything, and often you can't even tell what it is from the name. So you just sort of point at if you're adventurous, you just point somewhere and something comes up. Or you can just look over and say, I want one of those that guy's eating.
That's actually something that you can do even today in the States when you go into an Asian restaurant. Because, so, frankly, I remember one time I was in San Francisco, and we went to a place that I had actually scouted out ahead of time, specifically because I knew that their menu wasn't in English. There was nothing in English in the menu. And the only reason I knew that I could go there ahead of time, because my wife is a vegetarian, was that I had read that they had a vegetarian menu. So all I had to say was vegetarian, and then they just started bringing food out. And we were the only Caucasians in the place, I remember. It was a huge place. It was actually in the Japanese area of town. I don't remember the name of it now because it was quite a long time ago. But it was for us, it was a fascinating experience, and I highly recommend for people to go out of their comfort zone, and that's one way to do it.
Yes. Yeah, I had some very interesting experiences with food out there.
Well,
but
the stinky tofu sounds like a tremendously interesting experience.
That was good. They used to have it where you could buy it in little jars, but I don't think it's in the U.S. It's not available here. You have to buy a ticket and go out there to get access.
Well, thank you very much, Doug White. We really appreciate all the fascinating information about Taiwanese food and culture, and we are going to luckily be able to watch Grace make us some sweet and sour vegetables, and those of you in the listening audience, you can just find the recipe on the blog post. And so this has been Great Taste on KRUU 100.1 FM, the solar-powered voice of Fairfield, Iowa. I'm Steve Boss, and you have been listening to 60 Minutes of Delicious Radio on KRUU-FM.
Great Taste. Sweet. Sour. So good to taste.